It was recently announced that Tom Cruise's daughter, Suri, dropped legally his last name and is now known as Suri Noel. Why would she do such a thing? Was Scientology involved? I'm going to go into details as to how this possibly could involve Scientology and how their policy of disconnection tears apart families. Hello, everybody. Welcome to my channel, Scientology Peeling the Onion. My name is Mark Fisher, and I was in Scientology from the age of 14 until the age of 32, the last 6 years of which I worked directly for David Miscavige in charge of his office at the secret base at Gillham Hot Springs. I was around when Tom Cruise first met David Miscavige, and I detailed that in a video on our channel a few years ago. Suri is the daughter of Tom Cruise and his wife at the time, Katie Holmes. Here's photographs of Suri when she was a young girl with Tom and Katie when they were married and together. Tom Cruise has been a Scientologist for a long time, since the mid-1980s, and he's become very devoted to Scientology. As a matter of fact, his best friend is my ex-boss, David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology. What is David Miscavige's involvement with Tom Cruise and Tom Cruise's personal life? Tom is the face of Scientology along with David Miscavige. If Scientology did not have Tom Cruise involved, it wouldn't get anywhere near the publicity that it does over the years. He is the most high-profile celebrity that Scientology has. He, of course, is the largest box office star in the world and is known world over. But few people know about his close relationship with David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology. He is totally devoted to David Miscavige and to the aims and goals of Scientology. Many people believe Scientology, and they have the right to do so. But Tom Cruise's devotion to Scientology and David Miscavige is something that we're going to talk about here. First of all, how did Katie Holmes and Tom Cruise even get together? Shelley Miscavige and David Miscavige, they set up a project within Scientology to find a girlfriend and a suitable wife for Tom Cruise in the early 2000s. He had already been married to Mimi Rogers and then to Nicole Kidman. And after Nicole Kidman, he wanted to find somebody that he could have a long-term relationship with. He had a relationship short-term with Penelope Cruz, but when he tried to get her involved in Scientology, she did not go for it. So Dave Miscavige and Shelley Miscavige set up this project run by Sea Org members where they were interviewing actresses and people who they thought might be adequate for Tom Cruise. And Katie Holmes is the person that they came up with, and they were introduced, and the next thing you know, they were together. In fact, David Miscavige was Tom Cruise's best man at the wedding to Katie Holmes back in 2006. David Miscavige is all about control, and Scientology is about control, particularly a celebrity like Tom Cruise. They want to know everything about him, what he does, and who he sees. And it's no different when Tom Cruise was with Katie Holmes. He had people working for Tom Cruise and Katie Holmes who were Scientologists, and they would report on their activities directly to David Miscavige on a daily basis. His housekeepers, his security staff, his personal assistant were all Scientologists and controlled by David Miscavige. Tom Cruise was also aware of the fact that they were monitoring Katie Holmes. They had a way of tracking her phone and knowing what she was doing. The details of their divorce and what Scientology's involvement was covered in the Vanity Fair article of October 2012, written by the renowned reporter Maureen Orth. What Katie didn't know. Suri at that point was reaching the age where Scientology counseling and auditing and Scientology training could be started with a young child. Katie did not want to have that happen, and she maneuvered to get away from Tom and from David Miscavige's control. While Tom Cruise was off in Europe and London on a movie press tour, that's when she decided to leave, and she fired the security guards, got rid of her cell phones, took her daughter, and went to Ohio, and the divorce proceedings began. Tom Cruise was devastated and caught by surprise. The divorce was quickly settled, never went to court. Katie Holmes got custody of Suri and whatever financial arrangements that were made. And she had to sign a non-disclosure agreement so that she would not go into the details regarding her relationship with Tom Cruise. And to this day, she has not done so. The sources of this story, though, were ex-Scientology Sea Organization members who were the ones involved with recruiting potential mates for Tom Cruise and his staff at his residences, and other high-placed ex-Scientology Sea Org members. Suri was only 6 years old at the time that Tom and Katie divorced and the settlement was made. So why would Scientology have anything to do with her, and why Tom Cruise eventually had no relationship with Suri whatsoever? L. Ron Hubbard, the Scientology founder, writes many policies for Scientology that have to be followed by all Scientologists. One of the things that he talks about is suppressive people or a suppressive person, and how they can hold somebody back from making their gains on the bridge to total freedom in Scientology. Here's what Scientology says a suppressive person is. This is the official Church of Scientology definition. Suppressive person, SP. A suppressive person, SP, is a person who seeks to suppress other people in their vicinity. A suppressive person will goof up or vilify any efforts to help anybody, and particularly knife with violence anything calculated to make human beings more powerful or more intelligent. To go into more detail, a suppressive person in Scientology is anybody who speaks out against Scientology or reports Scientology in any way, shape, or form. That person is determined to be a suppressive person by Scientology. You could see something wrong or something that was being done wrong and report it, just like anybody else would in any other religion. Scientology would hold that against the person. Myself and all the different people who speak out on the internet, for example, we're all suppressive people in Scientology's eyes. Scientology policy by L. Ron Hubbard actually has a declare written on the person where they write an issue that gets distributed to everyone in Scientology stating that they are a suppressive person, which means in Scientology that you're not to associate with them any way, shape, or form, or have any communication with them at all, because they are trying to suppress you from proceeding in Scientology. What a Scientologist is supposed to do when they have a relationship with someone who gets declared a suppressive person is disconnect. Scientology has a policy of disconnection, and that's where you can no longer have communications or relationships with them in any way, shape, or form. Here's a definition of disconnection from the official Church of Scientology. The term disconnection is defined as a self-determined decision made by an individual that he is not going to be connected to another. It is a severing of a communication line. You notice that they mention self-determined. That's because it's actually church policy that you must disconnect from somebody like me or like Katie Holmes or somebody who left Scientology. You must disconnect from them. But for public relations purposes, they make it, the person made it of their own choice. But if they don't choose to disconnect from the suppressive person, whether that be a family member or friend or business associate, they are no longer allowed in Scientology and can no longer continue on what they consider the bridge to total freedom. So it's not really a choice if you're a dedicated Scientologist. I had to make this decision myself when my father and my young brother left Scientology when I was 19 years old. My goal was to work for L. Ron Hubbard, And this was a detriment in my mind to my goal. I would not be able to go and work with L. Ron Hubbard if I was connected to my father and my brother. I made the determination based on Scientology policy, because I was dedicated as a Scientologist, to disconnect from my father and my brother. And I remained disconnected from them, did not communicate with them for over 12 years until I finally left Scientology and reconnected with them and made amends and apologized to them for what I had done. Many Scientologists have done this over the years. And there are many families who've been broken up over the years over this disconnection policy. It's one of the most evil things that Scientology does, because whether somebody is connected to a family member or friend who is not in favor of Scientology in some way, Scientologists should be able to stand up to them and communicate with them. Because if they're truly a dedicated Scientologist, something somebody else says to them is not going to shake their beliefs. Scientology has this policy because they want to maintain control over the people involved with Scientology. By keeping them under control, they know that they will continue to pay money for services and try to continue up the bridge to total freedom. It's actually a very selfish decision made by the Scientologist. It was a selfish decision by me at the time when I disconnected from my father and my brother. I wanted to work with L. Ron Hubbard, and that's why I made that decision. And it was the wrong decision to make. My sister, who remained in Scientology after I left, made the same decision to disconnect from me, as well as my father and brother, who she had already disconnected from. And she would not communicate with me up until the day that she passed away. Scientology has this policy, and it is an evil policy. And if you're truly a dedicated Scientologist like Tom Cruise is, then you have to disconnect from somebody who, quote unquote, is suppressing you. This is why Tom Cruise does not have a relationship with his daughter Suri over the years. Katie Holmes was determined to be a suppressive person, whether or not Scientology issued a declaration order or not. She was determined to be a suppressive person. And so Tom Cruise should not and would not be associated with her in any way, shape, or form. And because Suri was with her mother, Katie Holmes, he could not have a relationship with her either, because in Scientology, the policy is that Suri would be a potential trouble source for Tom Cruise and for Scientology. So they make the selfish decision to disconnect from his own daughter. And that is how that happens. And that is how Scientology is involved with breaking up the relationship between Tom Cruise and his daughter, Suri. Now, Suri is an adult now. She's 20 years old, and she can make her own self-determined decisions. Well, obviously, she was hurt by what happened with the relationship between her father and her mother, and she decided to drop the last name of Cruise and take the name Noel. That's her choice as an adult. I have a high likelihood suspicion that Scientology and the relationship that was disconnected from and cut by Scientology had to have had something to do with it. And this is a pattern with Tom Cruise, as well as with other Scientologists. Let's go over it. Tom was gotten into Scientology by his first wife, Mimi Rogers, who was a lifelong Scientologist born into it and was highly trained in Scientology when she first met Tom Cruise in the 1980s, when he was just rising as a star. They got married. She's the one that got Tom Cruise involved with Scientology at a local field group where she was an auditor, and she got him involved with Scientology. David Miscavige found out that Tom Cruise was in Scientology after Top Gun, and he wanted to take control of the relationship with Tom Cruise because he saw him as a big boost to Scientology and its expansion. So he arranged for Tom Cruise to come up and go to the gold base, the secret base that no other Scientologist public was allowed to come to, And that's where they first met. And I happened to be working there at the time with David Miscavige when he first met Tom Cruise. Tom, at the time, was getting ready to shoot the film Days of Thunder, and he met a young actress, Nicole Kidman, and he wanted to have a relationship with Nicole Kidman. David Miscavige wanted to get Mimi Rogers out of the picture because Mimi's father, Phil Spickler, who was a Scientology mission holder for years and years, had left Scientology and had been declared a suppressive person. And so he didn't want Phil Spickler or Mimi anywhere near Tom Cruise. So when Tom mentioned that he was interested in Nicole Kidman, Scientology and David Miscavige arranged a divorce between Tom and Mimi Rogers. They let Tom have what he wanted. Normally in Scientology, the only reason somebody wants to get divorced, in their view and L. Ron Hubbard's view, is because they've committed transgressions against the other partner. And they clean those transgressions up because the idea is to keep them together. It's not permitted normally for someone to divorce. But Tom Cruise was given the red carpet and he was allowed to divorce Mimi Rogers and connect up with Nicole Kidman. Scientology was involved in that situation, and it's documented in several books, and I was there during that time when this happened. Tom then started a relationship with Nicole Kidman and got married to Nicole. They ended up adopting 2 children, which you see there on the right, and they were together from 1990 until early 2000. Nicole Kidman was interested and got involved with Scientology. However, when she got up to the OT levels, she started to distance herself from Scientology and started pulling Tom Cruise away from David Miscavige and away from Scientology in the mid-1990s, to the point where David Miscavige was no longer in communication with Tom Cruise. He was ignoring his phone calls. This David Miscavige could not stand for. So he had a guy named Marty Rathbun handle Tom Cruise and get him to realize that Nicole Kidman was actually a suppressive person as well. Nicole's father was involved with psychology, which is public enemy number 1 to Scientology. They ended up getting divorced in the early 2000s, and Nicole moved away from Tom. They shared custody of their 2 adopted children. However, the 2 kids, Connor and Isabella, they got heavily involved with Scientology and stayed close with their father, and they're Scientologists to this day. What's their relationship with Nicole Kidman? She never sees them anymore, apparently. Again, because of the Scientology disconnection policy, they consider Nicole Kidman a suppressive person. And so therefore, Tom, Isabella, and Connor, they do not have a relationship with their mother, Nicole Kidman. This policy by L. Ron Hubbard on suppressive people being declared and disconnection has ruined many families, not just Tom Cruise's family. It ruined my family. It ruined many, many people that we have interviewed on our channel here about what goes on in Scientology. Well, let's take a look at L. Ron Hubbard, though. Is he the virtuous one on family and children? L. Ron Hubbard is such an expert on family and relationships that he actually was married to 2 women at the same time. His first wife was Polly, and they had 2 children. But then, while he was still married to Polly, he got married to Sarah Northrup. Here's a picture of Hubbard and Sarah in the early 1950s. They had a daughter as well. So he was married to 2 women at the same time. Then Hubbard had a falling out with Sarah and actually took their daughter to Cuba in the 1950s away from Sarah, and she actually filed criminal charges against him for kidnapping. He then got involved with Mary Sue Hubbard, his 3rd wife, and they ended up having a family together, which you see here. He was more dedicated to Scientology and growing Scientology. The boy on the left is Quentin Hubbard, his oldest son by Mary Sue Hubbard, who ended his life in the late 1970s. Diana Hubbard, with the long hair, also on the left-hand side of Hubbard, She's the only child that's still involved with Scientology, and she's basically a figurehead in Scientology and used by David Miscavige to wheel out to events. The other two children on the right, Suzette Hubbard and Arthur Hubbard, they're no longer in Scientology as far as management or anything like that goes. As a matter of fact, L. Ron Hubbard's grandkids none of them are involved in Scientology either. And then what about the current leader of Scientology, David Miscavige? Well, many of you know that David Miscavige's wife, Shelley Miscavige, has not been seen in public in over 20 years. They were very close. They were the first couple of Scientology, and it's been on the internet for years. Where is Shelley? Where is she? What's she doing? How come she's not seen anymore? And then there's David Miscavige's father, Ron Miscavige Sr. Ron Miscavige escaped from the Sea Organization after being in there for many years, along with his wife, Becky. David Miscavige sicked private investigators on them to follow them for several years. It was during that time that Ron Miscavige Sr. caught the two private investigators who were arrested by police in Wisconsin, and they told Ron Sr. about what these guys were doing and that they thought that he was dying of a heart attack. These private investigators told the police that when they contacted supposedly David Miscavige, they asked if they should intervene if he was having a heart attack. And according to them, Miscavige told them, if he dies, he dies. Let him go. Ron Sr. then wrote a book about his son, Ruthless, against David Miscavige and started speaking out on the internet about the abusive behavior of his son, the leader of Scientology. Not a great relationship with his father or with his wife. Which brings us back to Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is dedicated to Scientology over his own family. He's dedicated to his career over his own family. On the left is a photograph of him for his upcoming movie, Digger. It's his attempt at winning an Academy Award, which he's never done in the past. He wants to win an Academy Award, and this is going to be his vehicle, and he's promoting it like crazy all over the place. Meanwhile, it turns out that his daughter, Suri, has dropped his last name, and that's in the news at this time. Cruise has definitely chosen Scientology and his career over his daughter and his immediate family, and he's done it over and over again with all of his wives. On the bright side, Suri seems to be doing great. She's in college at Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, and apparently is a good student there. She's 20 years old, and she's living her best life. Thankfully, she has a relationship with her mother, Katie Holmes, and they appear to be extremely close. Katie, it looks like, has done a great job raising her daughter, letting her move on, get educated, and have a career of her own. The Scientology policy of disconnection is an evil policy. Whether somebody's trying to suppress you or stop you, that's one thing if it's dangerous. For instance, if you're in an abusive relationship, you need to get away from that abusive relationship. But if somebody decides to leave Scientology, or somebody has negative opinions about Scientology in your life, you shouldn't have to disconnect from them. You should be strong enough as a Scientologist to be able to communicate and confront them. It's just like politics these days. Somebody could have views on the left or views on the right. It's wrong when you disconnect from family members over politics. It's the same with Scientology and religion. Your family are your closest people, and they're the ones that are going to be there when the end comes. And you need to continue to have a relationship with your family. Scientology, if they ever wanted to grow again, needs to get rid of this policy, or it'll never happen. Their reputation of tearing apart families and abusing people and children actually stops any growth or any good works that they may be doing. If you're interested in more information about David Miscavige, there's a great new book out called David Miscavige, The Scientology Leader in the Shadow by Claudio and Renata Lugli. You see them there on the right. You can order this book on Amazon. It's a great read. We just had them on our show, for 2 episodes and interviewed them. They were the personal stylists of David and Shelley Miscavige for years, and they tell great stories and in-depth stories about David Miscavige and his control over celebrities and Scientologists. I recommend that people order this book. I think you're going to find it very interesting. The other book that you should read is my co-host's book, Commodore's Messenger by Janis Gillham Grady. That's Janis there at age 13 with L. Ron Hubbard on the ship Apollo. She lived with and worked with L. Ron Hubbard on the Apollo all through her teenage years. She was one of his original messengers and was with him 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, almost every day. And she was closer to L. Ron Hubbard than just about anyone, her along with the other messengers on the ship at the time. But you can order her book right down below in our merchandise store. This is book 1, and she wrote a second book here. There she is as well as a teenager with L. Ron Hubbard. They're loaded with photographs from that time period, and Janis tells lots of great stories if you want to learn more about L. Ron Hubbard and Scientology. Both books you can get autographed down below in our merchandise store, and I think you're going to find them very informative. Finally, if you're new to our channel, please subscribe to our channel, hit that like button, hit that notification button. We appreciate anybody who wants to come on. We've done over 400 shows on our channel documenting the history of Scientology and exposing the abuses, and we think you're going to find the channel very interesting. If you have any questions or comments, please comment down below in the comment section. We read them all and we will respond to you. And if you'd like to support our channel, please buy us a coffee. There's a link in the video description down below. It just offsets the expenses we have. There are expenses in doing these shows, and we appreciate any support that we might get from there. Until next time, everybody. Bye-bye.